These little guys cause us artists so much trouble. When to use this one? What the heck is that for? Am I pressing too hard this time? But listen, I've got all the ideas so you can wrangle the troops, the brushes, and get past all of the annoying questions and into more painting. Friends, this is a paint with me type of situation, so I want you to grab your Christie brushes. This is my Art for Joy's Sake set. Listen, if you don't have my brushes, I still want you to join me. I'm going to show you what yours might look like in a little bit. And of course, you're going to need some paper, your favorite watercolor paint. It doesn't have to be fancy, and let's get right down to it. Yes, indeed, friends. I did design my own set of brushes, and you may have some that look similar to these, but then again, you may not have a single one of these in your arsenal, and that's okay. You may have some things that look a little bit like this. So as we're working through these brush drills, I just want you to find whatever brush you use that looks the most similar to the one I'm using and go for it. The Unshakable Joy brush. It's a 3/4 inch flat wash. Notice how I'm holding the brush really far down, almost right at the bristles. And I'm going to load up with a lot of juicy color and just make a stroke that's going to go across the top of my paper. I'm using 5x7. Now, notice I might brace my hand a lot during these drills with my pinky finger. That's something I do. You can try it, see how it feels for you. Now I'm going to make a second line with the same color. You do you. And I'm going to stop about 2/3 the way across and try to match up my line with another color. So try to make it as continuous as possible, but with another color. Notice on that second stripe of color, I was holding the brush a little bit further up, not as close to the bristles. And just pay attention as I navigate these drills where I'm holding the brush, because I'd like you to try to mimic that. There's specific reasons why I want you to be aware of where you're holding your brush. Number one, you're going to find ways that feel most comfortable to you. And number two, you're going to notice a lot of different things that happen depending on where you're gripping your brush. Now, throughout all of this, keep in mind the grip on your brush should not be a chokehold. It should feel just kind of natural. You don't want your hand to start cramping quickly. If that's happening, you're most likely holding on too hard. You're holding on for dear life, and you need to take a moment, take a breath, relax your fingers, and come back to it. But the point of this page is to try to create a stroke that is the width of the flat wash brush and get a sense for what that feels like and how much water, how much paint you need on your brush to do that. And then the stopping and starting of the line and trying to maintain that height is going to help you develop muscle memory for the control you need to govern what this brush does in a way that feels really good. Grab another sheet of paper and let's try to do something floral. Load up that brush again and notice where I'm holding it. And just stroke and sweep. Stroke and sweep. Think about an invisible center as you're stroking and sweeping. The point isn't to make the most delightful, lovely flower that you've ever made, but the point is to start to understand the limitations of this brush, what it can and can't do with one stroke, depending on the angle the stroke is taking, how you're holding the brush, and in this case, the fact that we're not moving the paper at all. Now, everything can change if you move the paper and you kind of spin the paper on a central axis, so to speak. That can make creating petals with any brush a whole lot easier. But for this drill, we're really just focusing on what we can do, keeping the paper in one spot and just radiating that brush and the pressure and the sweep and stroke of the brush around an invisible center of a flower. Next up, I'm just going to be using the edge, just the little tip of this brush, using kind of a reddish tone color, and we're going to make some dots at the center. And again, this isn't about the most beautiful flower. This is about a quick, somewhat representational method for learning more about your brush. Again, pay attention to where I'm holding the brush each time, but if you feel like you're ready to kind of mix it up and do something totally different than what I'm doing, for example, maybe holding that brush way far towards the tip of the brush, then by all means do that. Now I'm adding some leaves and I'm doing a perpendicular hold where my brush is basically like forming a T with the surface of the paper being the short side of the T and my brush being the long side. And I'm just creating kind of a sweep and a swoosh and seeing what happens. And as you continue to do a sweep and a swoosh and a press and a lift and a drag with this brush, holding it in the way that I'm showing you, you're going to learn a whole lot about what it can and can't do. I love this one. Load your brush, not too wet, not too dry, and literally just tap and lift, light pressure, and you can create branches and stems like nobody's business. Super fun, super easy. Just filling a page with that perpendicular hold, press, and lift tap could be a really fun way to build up muscle memory for filler, branches, and vines. Next up is the Forget Rules brush. It's a 1/2-inch dagger, curved edge, pointed edge, and flat edge. Just take notice of how I am holding this brush. With all of these exercises, the general idea for loading your brush is a good balance between not too much water and not too little water. All right, I'm holding the brush about halfway up on the handle, and I'm just using the curved edge to create a stroke going horizontally from left to right. And then I'm going to make a thicker stroke that has a little wave to it. Let that paint run out. Get a feel for how easily or how difficult it is to get that paint to run out. That'll give you information about how much more water you might need to load on that brush for what you want to do. And you're just going to continue down the height of this paper, creating different lines, messing around with the pressure. Notice I stopped my one line here about 2/3 of the way across, coming from the left. And then I continued that line, tried to match that up beautifully and seamlessly, but with another color. The idea with this type of fill the page brush drill is to just try different things, but keeping in mind a few details. So you want to be willy-nilly with the kind of brush stroke, but I'd like you to be a little bit more focused and committed to challenging yourself with this one detail. Try to leave some white margin between each line that you create. So try not to bump up one line to the other and let those bleeds happen. This is going to teach you a lot about how to control your brush, where you need to hold the brush on the handle. Now, you can certainly follow how I do it to get a similar amount of control and similar results. But the reality is we're all different. Our hands are different, our arms are different, all the things. So what hold works for me may not work for you. I am doing this big, bold blue stroke across now using that curved edge to see how thick of a stroke I can create. And then I'm right back to those wavy lines. I've always said with drills and exercises and practice like this, that's very specific, and really the point of it all is practice. If you feel like you want to take some notes, you want to put down the brush and take some notes, and your brain kind of works that way beautifully, then by all means, do it. Notice I'm now holding my brush way far out on the edge and almost kind of letting it pivot like you might a chopstick if you're familiar with using chopsticks. And now I'm creating kind of a dotted line, but I'm still following the rule of let there be some white margin between what I did last and what I'm doing now. And this last stroke on the page is a fun one. Just fill in what's left of the white paper, all the while keeping that margin. This time we're going to use what I call smiley face strokes. And it's basically like your brush stroke is creating a grin. So it's not a big smile, but it's kind of like a grin. And you're going to create those back and forth, almost like your brush were in the ocean and it's just swaying back and forth, curving up on the left, coming down and curving back up, creating a slight smile shape. Now, I'm using a little bit of this pinkish red, and you use what you want. I'm thinking of sky here, to be honest, because I really enjoy when an exercise or a drill actually produces something that feels a little bit like an actual painting. I don't know about you, that feels really good to me. So I'm creating these smile type brush strokes over and over. Now I'm going for some water, so I'm going to grab some blue, but I'm going to go back to very similar strokes I was creating with the last drill. So just some different types of lines, one underneath the other with some margin in between. Now here come those grin kind of smile lines, but then I'm very quickly going to some up strokes with the curved edge of my brush and my whole brush at an angle and back to those kind of wavy, smiley shapes, but they're all connected. Keep an eye on the handhold. Try what I'm doing. Maybe something else will be more comfortable for you. Load up with some green, and this time we're going to be holding the brush to create some vertical lines instead of horizontal lines. And I'm just going to tap, 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 and lift, tap, 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 and lift, and repeat that over and over. And what you're going to notice, probably fairly quickly, is this is starting to look like some foreground or a forest in the foreground. But you're learning a ton about what the brush can do depending on how you hold it, how much water is on your brush, how much paint is on your brush. And this time around, at what angle your brush is being placed on the paper compared to the orientation of the paper. And then a few final strokes in something that resembles brown. These are, again, those horizontal strokes that by this point you're pretty familiar with, and you've got a little bit of sandy something in the very front. Next, what I call the Art for Joystick brush, it's a 1/4 inch dagger. Similar to what we did with the green paint in the last drill, we're going to create some vertical marks. Notice where I'm holding my brush and tap, 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 tap. And I want you to take that almost all the way across the page. If you need to reload at any point to continue to maintain similar results to mine, go for it. But right at the end, with whatever's left on your brush, I want you to make a big, broad stroke. I want you to feel what that feels like. I want you to really experience that, because those type of transitions from one distinct mark to another are so helpful in loose watercolor painting. So now we're going to start on the right-hand side of the page, make all the same type of marks, tap, 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 and then at some point you're going to transition to a big sweep with whatever's left on your brush. All right, rinse that brush off, grab the next color. I will say these drill pages really look cool when they're all quote unquote done. Notice my hand hold, I'm going far down again. I do tend to hold my brush pretty far down. And I'm sweeping from the left on that curved edge, and I'm sweeping up with a little bit of a swoop. So it's not a straight sweep, it's a curved sweep. There's almost like a little hook halfway through the stroke. And repeat that again and again and again. Rinse the brush, and we're on to the next color. I do like doing drills in a limited color palette. It just kind of cleans the brain. It's not too much fuss, not too much muss. I don't like doing one color because I get bored. I don't know. Would you get bored? Let me know in comments if you'd get bored with one color. This time I'm starting from the right-hand side of the page, and I'm making a very similar sweeping curved motion, but I'm slowing it down so I'm not getting that thin little hook at the edge of the stroke. Now go in between in that white margin that I left and add a few little strokes, and try not to touch the other colors with these strokes. You're going to use the very tip of this dagger brush that comes to a point, and try not to get any bleeding. Now, I wasn't thoroughly successful, but it's a really good exercise with control and how you control your brush to be able to fill in those white areas in a way that doesn't create a mess, if you will, with the colors next door. All right, halfway down on that brush, and I'm going to sweep, and I'm going to kind of cut into the shape that my last line created, but I'm leaving you guessed it, a white margin. This is a little more advanced. You need to slow down. Notice I reloaded. You could let your paint run out, but I'd rather your brush be a little more juicy for this one because it's a little bit more of a challenge. And again, try not to run into that previous color. For me, it was that purpley blue. Oh, this looks so good. It's so fun, right? Let me know in comments if you're having a good time. If you are, just say fun. But you know what? If you're painting, just ignore me. Just keep painting. All right, notice how I'm holding my brush. This is a overhand hold, as I like to call it. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush, and I'm doing a diagonal sweeping stroke from top left to bottom right. Imagine this. This could be waves. This could be texture in a foreground of a landscape. landscape. And you knew I wasn't going to leave it without using that long, straight edge of the brush that just doesn't even feel right that you should use it, but I use that edge of the brush all the time. Load up that brush with a lot of paint and water, and I want you to just make free-form marks. I definitely would recommend a little swirl, but you can do some other stuff and see how it feels to paint with that edge of the brush. On to the Watercolor Curious brush. It's a #1 cat's tongue. Load up your brush, notice my handhold, and we are going to make some loop-de-loos. It reminds me of like an old school, rotary phone cord. And I'm holding the brush really far down, and it's almost a perpendicular hold, but not quite. And you might be able to see I am bracing myself, giving some kind of structure to my hold by placing my pinky on the page and letting it kind of follow my stroke along the page. Don't feel bad if you have to kind of stop and reconnect one stroke with another. It doesn't have to be continuous to teach you something. All right, load up with a different color. Here's where we're getting a little challenging again. I want you to fill in that dip in your loop-de-loo, but leave some white margin. So it's almost like you're painting in a little, a little chiclet or a little mint or a little candy inside this little swoopy line. I know, my descriptions are ridiculous, but I hope you stick with me. And imagine where this type of control with the brush would come in handy. You might be painting shingles on a roof, or you might be creating some type of seed pod in a flower composition. But let me tell you what, this kind of control comes in handy for me all the time. And now I'm going across the top edge and doing what I can to connect all of the green chiclet candy bits. Okay? I really like this one. This might be my favorite drill of the entire video. Let me know if you agree. Also, a really awesome way that you can let me know if this video is doing it for you is to go ahead and give it a boop. And in watercolor land, a boop is a like. Rinse that brush, load up a new color, you know the drill, all the puns intended, and we're gonna go right underneath using as much of the surface area of the brush as possible. And you might be like, Christy, how do I do that? You're just gonna press a little harder, all right? So you're going to press and tuck that brush underneath that red swirl as you see it on my page, and then you're gonna come back down and lighten up on the pressure to get that thinner little line. And you're gonna repeat that again and again. So a tuck and curve up, and then a little swoop and less pressure stroke down. And you might be feeling it. As we kind of evolve in this video, the intensity or maybe the difficulty is evolving as well. And if it's stressing you out, I'd say kind of take a break, take a breath, take a beat, and make some simpler marks using your cat's tongue. Don't feel like you have to follow my more crazy, weird strokes, because the thing is, I want you to keep painting. I don't want you to be stressed out. So this stroke that I've been talking through is a really simple one. It's just a downstroke with the edge or the side of the cat's tongue brush. So not the flat, wide part of the brush, the thin side of the brush. Don't forget about the white margin. The white margin is so important for really building muscle memory because it gives you a distinct goal of where to start and stop. And it prevents your drill page from turning into kind of a watery mess where you might get overwhelmed and just walk away. This stroke is kind of the opposite of the last. We are going to be using that broad side of the brush. Just tap it up and down, making a vertical mark with a little bit of a wiggle. So it's a press with a juicy brush, lots of water and paint on there, and a little bit of a wiggle vertically up and down, a little bit, and just keep repeating. You're going to need to reload that brush often. My brushes specifically are synthetic, so they don't hold as much paint as a natural bristle brush would. So if you're using natural bristle brushes, you're going to be able to get a lot further with 1 or 2 loads of your brush. Next up is just a swoopy, kind of swirly shape. This one should feel really comfortable. It's almost like a little reprieve, a little break from all the intensity. But notice it's not a continuous swoop or swirl. I'm almost taking a little hesitation. I'm not fully lifting up the brush from my page, but I'm hesitating and slowing down to an almost stop in between each swirly, loopy, doopy, whatever this is. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. This one is so fun. It's going to feel really, really relaxing. Just a broad stroke using the side of your brush. See how thick of a mark you can make and notice how I'm holding that brush. I'm holding it so I am making the stroke in a vertical fashion. It's a horizontal stroke, but my brush is vertical. Using the tip of the brush with a perpendicular hold. So that means my hand is in the way of what I'm actually doing. That's a great way to actually understand if you're doing this like I am. If you look above your hand when you're doing a vertical hold, you probably can't see what you're painting because it's directly under your hand. Just some thin lines with some white margin in between, and then I want you to go into the white margin with more thin lines, trying not to bump into your first lines. And good luck because it's hard. Now, just add some dots at the bottom. It's like a reward. Your last row is going to be a few diagonal lines in one color about halfway across the page, and then I want you to switch up your color. These are different in that they are juicy. We did very similar lines earlier with a different brush, but it was more of a dry brush, and these are done with a distinctly more wet brush. I've been talking a lot, so let me just say this. What you're watching now is me taking the strokes that I was using during the cat's tongue drill and creating some simple, what you might call pinwheel flowers. So just watch, see how I do it, and then I'd love for you to give it a go. But don't feel like yours has to look like mine. The idea, simple strokes, very similar to what you did on your drill page, but turn them into a very simple, quick composition. Now we're on the happy painting brush. It's a number 2 round. Now I'm going to warn you, when the brushes start getting smaller, the drill pages take longer to complete. So at this stage with the last 2 brushes, you might want to go to a smaller piece of paper so you don't get bored. I know, a lot of art teachers don't talk like me, but the reality is, sometimes, if the paper's too big, you can get bored. I have been painting some small strokes here. I'm going from the bottom up, so it's an upstroke. And I'm trying to keep them similar in thickness, so keeping an eye on the pressure each time I create the stroke. Next line, notice where I'm holding the brush halfway down, and I'm using that vertical hold, and I'm going to stroke horizontally. My brush is going to run out of color really easily. It's okay. Just try to pick up where you left off when you reload and keep it going and make it look like it makes sense, essentially, is what you want to do. It doesn't have to be the same thickness, but just keep that line going. All right, let's keep moving on. Ocean waves. Think ocean waves with a light hold. Continue with the ocean waves, but with a heavier pressure on the brush. Now we're going to do some elongated dots. And yeah, reloading often, but this is important. These smaller brushes, synthetic bristles, you need to understand the amount of reloading that is really realistic. Now, small dots, this time load up that brush like it's your job. Lots of water, lots of paint, and see how thick of a mark you can make over and over. Let the paint run out in between. Similar kind of vertical hold going across horizontally, and I want you to go from a thick line to a kind of scratchy thin line, and then repeat that. It's almost looking like Morse code. Now a swirl, maybe 2 more swirls. Okay, y'all, it's all about the swirls. Just pay attention to a handhold that feels good and try to keep that line of those swirls continuous for these last few on the page. Now, there's a reason I had you do so many swirls. There's usually a method to my madness. Indeed. This time around, same thing. I'm going to try to stop talking so much, and I'd love for you to create some swirly, loopy outlines of flowers. And you can see what I'm doing here. You don't have to follow me, but you certainly can. Notice my handholds as I'm going from flower petal to flower center with dots, as I'm sketching in a little little bit of a leafy shape as I'm adding the stems. All of these marks were practice in the previous drill. Probably one of my favorite brushes, not gonna lie, the Remember Joy brush. It's a #1 liner. I'm gonna say it again. You're gonna be loading this brush a lot. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong. You're gonna be loading it a lot. Okay. You're watching what I'm doing here. It's like really deep smiley faces. So it's a deep curve with this brush, and I'm having to reload between each mark. And let's make some lines underneath, keeping that margin in between. And let's make some more and try to connect these at the peak of each swoop. Now we're trying to see how thick of a line we can make in a swooping fashion. You're going to have to reload, but then find an interesting way to connect each swoop with the next. All right, some free form line work. This is where you're going to load your brush, your favorite color. Notice my hand hold. I like to hold it far down, and I just want you to create some thin, whispery lines. And you can fill this like 2.5-inch tall space however you want. Freestyle. Freeform. Some lines can be thicker, some can be thinner, and yeah, it kind of is reminding me like ocean waves, right? Right. Load up with a new color, and this one's gonna feel like you're destroying your brush. I want you to make scratchy, up and down, zigzaggy marks, but not uniform. I want your hand, the angle of your brush, and your hand to be moving kind of side to side, left to right, and everything in between as you go across the page horizontally. And with that one, working quickly gives you more interesting results, oddly enough. Now, a thin line still, but more controlled, and a slow kind of swagger of a line. Try to keep it continuous. Load up a lot of juicy color on that liner and swoop underneath all of those continuous controlled lines that you just created and try to tuck up underneath them, but in a haphazard way. Don't forget about the margin. And now have fun just filling in that bottommost area, but use this brush. It's gonna feel weird, but I'll tell you what, the liner brush is so incredibly versatile, you'll use it way more than you ever thought you would. All right, I've used the word freestyle, and as I'm starting to create my own little composition here, using all those strokes that we just used in the last drill, I gotta tell you a funny story about freestyle. So my friend's daughter swims, and she, is doing all these different backstrokes and butterflies and freestyle. And I was like, oh, cool. What is she going to do for her freestyle? And my friend's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, is she going to like do some kind of cool kick and then something really nifty with her arms? And my friend was like, no, freestyle is just the name of a specific type of stroke. And I'm like, dang, I'm glad freestyle actually means freestyle in watercolor. This is definitely another you do you, boo moment. You can certainly take your cues from how I am holding my brush, which by the way, it's a perpendicular hold. And then definitely keeping the brush loaded with a lot of water and color so I can kind of have that free continuous line. It's not getting too textury looking or too dry, but I want you to do your own thing. Don't get stuck. Don't get worried about it looking like mine. Because y'all, mine isn't like a masterpiece or anything, okay? We're here for the joy. We're here for the joy. I'm here, but you've got this, and I need a drink of water. Happy painting.